Welcome into MLS Six Pack here on the SDH Network. I'm Madison Cruz, and joined alongside me is Jason Longshore, the voice of Atlanta United, as we get you ready for the start of a brand new season in MLS, the 30th season, as we get you ready for everything that's going to happen this weekend involving Major League Soccer. It's going to be a ton of fun. I don't know about you, and I have a feeling I already know what you're going to say, but
Oh
I'm
boy.
excited for the 30th season. I think you're just getting the 30th expansion team in San Diego.
hmm
You get the start of the Atlanta United season. I know, like, for me, it's almost like you're like building up to like Christmas and you're like every night you're like sleeping and you're getting a little restless. I feel like that's me right now leading up to Saturday.
Yeah, it's weird. Like preseason has definitely like built at least here in Atlanta it has. I think in other markets maybe it's been, not a huge progression to the opener. I think here in Atlanta it's built from you think to camp opening, game 1 in Chattanooga, game 2 in Birmingham, then you get Miguel Almiron back in here. Then you get the latte lot deal over the line. And the team along the way too has progressed and gotten better and better and better. Other situations haven't been that. Some have added pieces very, very late. Lucho Acosta to Dallas. We saw him in Marietta on Saturday against Atlanta United. Evander, he made his debut for Cincinnati this week in CONCACAF. Looked pretty good, got a goal. You've had some moves incoming and outgoing here in the last week that I think Atlanta got their business done early. Some other teams did too. When that happens, it kind of affects the way that I think the build to the year goes. In some other markets, I wonder what it feels like right now. I think Atlanta might have the most expectation, the most excitement, the most energy building to the opener. I'm sure some others do too, but just it was the perfect timeline here going into this season with the way everything played out.
It's kind of nice. We didn't have to deal with the like emotional roller coaster of everything. It was kind of like everything happened like pretty much all at once. And
hmm
now like we're riding preseason and we're kind of like, okay, we're pretty much set. Everything's good. Because Latte Lath obviously was announced last week, and then we had the presser on Wednesday being
Yep.
introduced to the media. But I mean, even then, it was like, we didn't have the up and down roller coaster. I feel like some of these other teams are are having right now, especially as we get closer to a lot of the home openers for MLS. It's crazy. And I mean, you mentioned Evander going to Cincinnati. Also, Kevin Denke also making his
Yep.
competitive debut for Cincinnati as well. Let's talk about the fact that they both scored in that 4-1 win in the CONCACAF Champions Cup, which, by the way, since we're already on the subject, let's go ahead and talk about it. Because that happened earlier this week. A lot of MLS teams went ahead and started their run in the CONCACAF
Hey, you
Champions.
got Vancouver playing tonight at Saprissa.
We
Don't
do
leave the
have
Whitecaps
Vancouver.
out of this.
I'm
There's still
sorry.
one more. Apologize to Vancouver.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Vancouver. I didn't mean it. I apologize. It just happened.
I'm
Okay.
still sad that Vanny Sartini's no longer in Vancouver. So
That is very true. Very, very true. But you got the Seattle Sounders earning a 3-1 victory in their match. Colorado beat LAFC in their match. Then you obviously had Inter Miami, the craziness that was the
well, let's talk about the
weather.
Miami game and let's talk about the Colorado game because they
Let's
were
do it.
both ridiculously frigid in terms of temperature. Olivier Giroud had frost on his mustache, which was a very weird visual that I never thought I would ever see or have to talk about. Um, the conditions were terrible. And look, I know a lot of people with whatever agenda that you want to push about MLS changing calendar, like, oh, this is why you can't. I mean, this isn't normal for it to be 4 degrees in Commerce City and 3 degrees in Kansas City this time of year. There's always a chance of it being colder, but it's not normal. So let's chill. Kansas City still had an amazing crowd for the temperatures last night to be there to see Lionel Messi. And I thought it was a pretty good game. Colorado was not as good of a game. The Rapids giving up that late goal is a problem for them because they were in really good shape with a 2-0 lead going to Los Angeles for the second leg. They give up that late goal, and LAFC has momentum going into that game. The the free kick from Mihailovic was outstanding. The goal from Messi yesterday, obviously outstanding. Miami should be fine to advance going back home in the second leg. Colorado LAFC feels like more of a toss-up. I think LAFC will find a way to overcome the deficit. You brought up Cincinnati too. Great win for them in Honduras, 4-1 on the road. No problems to sweat in that second game. They can really heavily rotate and be just fine. Seattle, kind of the same situation, 3-1 win in Guatemala over Antigua. Both of them, and that's what you want in these CONCACAF early rounds. You don't want to have to sweat the second leg because it's going to be a talking point when we get into the match week 1 schedule. It's tough to play Wednesday, Tuesday, whatever, travel, go to Central America, come back, play on the weekend, get ready to host the second leg in the midweek. It's difficult. So the more you could take care of in leg 1, the better. Now, we did see the Mexican teams that struggled in game 1 handle their business in the second leg in the competition. You didn't see any, shocking eliminations from the Mexican teams in the second legs, like Cruz Azul 5-0 over Real Hope, Chivas 3-0 over Cibao, Tigres 3-0 over Real Esteli, Pumas 2-0 over Cavalry. They handled it. They were fine. So in these second legs, Cincinnati, they can breathe. Seattle, they can breathe. Salt Lake's got a sweat. They host Herediano in the second leg. That's 0-0. Colorado, they got to go to LAFC. I don't think they get through that. We'll see how Vancouver handles Saprissa tonight. CONCACAF it's a fun little start to the tournament. It's been weirder with the crazy weather conditions that teams have had to deal with this season.
Believe they said that it felt like -6 degrees
I saw
last
-7 in Kansas City.
Oh, okay.
I saw that one going around. I think 3 degrees at kick. I mean, it looked bad. I know Kansas City and Colorado does too. I'm almost certain, but the way the game looked and the way the game felt, maybe not. Kansas City has the heating underneath the pitch, so maybe it's better, or maybe Colorado doesn't have it. I thought Colorado did, but now thinking back to that game, I'm looking at it and it didn't look like it, or maybe it didn't completely work. I don't know. Kansas City, it felt like the game played all right.
Mhm.
There were definite effects of it, but it was okay. The game had a pretty normal flow. I think Colorado LAFC did not have as much of that.
Yeah, it was definitely strange. Obviously, I didn't get a chance to catch up a little bit on it. I just saw everything that was going on Twitter. Twitter X, excuse me.
It's all the same.
It's all the same at this point. Watching it after Georgia State last night, or Wednesday night, actually. Oof.
That's last night.
It was last night. Listen,
Welcome to the build up to the season. It's been chaotic.
my mind is losing it. I'm losing my mind. But yes, being just like scrolling through when I got home, I was like, Messi just scored on his non-dominant foot, as he's leaning back and he's able to finish. I mean, God, he's insane. Truly.
What he does. It was a great finish. Great goal. Let's jump into a couple of the other things before we get into the second segment, where you're going to hear from a bunch of different people. You're going to hear from Dax McCarty. You're going to hear from Callum Williams. You're going to hear from Brad Kazan. In MLS Six Pack, yeah, I know we're in Atlanta. Y'all know we're in Atlanta. We're going to talk about the league as a whole. We'll talk about Atlanta in that context, but you'll hear from those guys in the next segment. Let's bounce around really quick before we go to a quick break. We talked about Evander. We talked about Lucho Acosta. Those are two of the bigger moves of the MLS offseason, but that cash for trade setup that is now in effect for Major League Soccer. You saw the big move of Evander. You saw a lesser but still big move of Lucho. You saw the pretty big move of Joveljic, a little bit under Acosta in terms of like dollar amount. But you saw Jack McGlynn go to Houston. You saw Ted Pietro go to Colorado. You saw some smaller cash for player moves. I think that's a really good new rule in the league. I'm really excited about it. I think it's a smart play. We've seen some other moves this week with rosters. We've seen like Nico Ladero ending up in Houston. There was talk, and our friend Nico Moreno talked about how Seattle had the opportunity to re-sign him, but chose not to. You've had homegrown signings. Yet Houston had Michael Halliday as well from Orlando. That's another good signing I like. I mean, just scrolling through, guys like Bruno Damiani, who has gone to Philadelphia, that's going to go under the radar right now, but that could be a really big move. Ahmad Kasim going to Nashville, Swedish winger. That could be interesting. The other big one in the last couple of days, if you're getting caught up in this stuff, is Orlando. Wilder Cartagena out for the year. with an Achilles injury. Here in Atlanta, we know all about Achilles injuries. They did sign Edward Atuesta. They signed him after the injury to Cartagena, I think maybe before they knew the full extent. They were already talking about adding Atuesta. That move becomes really important. And it's one of those kind of sneaky additions for Orlando that, with Cartagena out, might be one of the most important moves in the offseason in MLS.
I mean, you don't plan for injuries, and it's when it happens, it comes at very unexpected times. It just conveniently, it's great that they already were talking about getting that signing, and now you get him brought in. Now he's going to be thrown in immediately, especially since you don't have that.
He's fine though. I mean, this is a guy who played a lot with LAFC, knows the league. He was, back in Brazil with Palmeiras, but he wasn't going to stick there. So it's a smart move from Orlando. We'll get into them when we get into kind of predictions and things. They're going to be a really interesting team to watch because I'm not quite sure where they fall at this point.
Because they traded a couple of players. They kept a lot of their roster from last season as well, though. They didn't have a crazy turnover with that. So they still have a pretty solid team. And, we saw that team, obviously, in the Eastern Conference semifinal. We saw that, and we know how powerful they can be and what they can do. So I think they're a team that's interesting. Like, I feel like they've kind of fallen under the radar a little bit, kind of like, especially with all the trades and with everything going on. They're kind of just like, we're here, we're hanging out. And I feel like it'll be interesting to see where things fall for them once we get started in the season and people realizing, oh, Orlando's there. They still got a pretty solid team, and they're coming into this one.
Yeah, they're going to be one to watch, but I don't know exactly where they fit in the power rankings just yet in the East. We'll get into that, but we're going to catch our breath for just a second. You're going to hear from Dax McCarty. You're going to hear from Callum Williams. You're going to hear from Brad Kazan. A lot of voices who know this league inside and out talking about this season in MLS, how the development of the league has gone. All of that coming up in just a bit on MLS Six Pack. Stay with us. We'll be right back after this.
Welcome back to MLS Six Pack here on the SDH Network. Just me this time, but we'll get you ready for some of those clips that we got today. Had the chance to catch up with Brad Guzan at media today for Atlanta United. Jason Longshore had the opportunity to ask him about the 30th season in MLS and just watching the growth of the league. And here's what he had to say.
MLS is going into year 30. You started Chivas USA. Not with us anymore.
Rest in peace.
But, how do you look back at that time and look at the league today?
Ooh,
how it's changed?
big change, huge change. Yeah, I mean, listen, I think back to, not to give my age away, right? But I tell some of these stories to some of these guys, like, they don't know what commercial flights are. They don't know what, not spending 4 days in a city is, and, having connecting flights. And, it was just that back in the day. And it's exciting to see where the leagues come from. It's exciting to see where we are. And I think most importantly, it's exciting to see where the league can go. And so for me, that's the most important part, because, I've been very fortunate to be a part of this league and see the growth firsthand. But as a fan of the game, I'm excited to see the sport grow in this country, and I think the potential is through the roof. And so that part is really
great stuff from Brad Guzan. Really intriguing. If you noticed, he was, had hands in pockets. It was freezing out at training today. So we all were trying to stay warm. Glad that we're all inside now, and very much warm from the freezing temperatures outside. Now moving on, I had the opportunity to catch up with Callum Williams, who's going to be the play-by-play announcer for Atlanta United versus CF Montreal. And I asked him about watching the growth of the league since he has been covering MLS since 2011.
The one thing that I think
say.
has made an astronomical difference has been the way that Major League Soccer is now very much a part of the global football market. When I first started covering Major League Soccer, Madison, back in 2011, it did feel as though it was a completely different world. And every time that there would be a player linked with a European team, or in my case, an English team, it didn't seem as though it was real. Now, it's very much part of the cause. There's players that are moving left, right, and centre, leaving Major League Soccer for the top leagues in Europe, but then the top players in Europe are also coming here now as well. So it's tremendous just to see the growth, and it almost comes at a perfect time, in my opinion, with the little thing that we've got next summer coming up with the FIFA World Cup in 2026. That's sort of a big deal, isn't it? So it comes at the perfect time, in my opinion. So it's been great to see that the salary cap has been sort of loosened as well. The domestic deals that are now allowed to be done with the internal transfers, I think, has made the league even more exciting and riveting as well. There was a couple of eye-watering transfers or trades. I'm not entirely sure what we're supposed to call them at the moment, but deals. We'll settle with that, shall we? Deals that were done internally in MLS that I thought, wow, this is a new age of Major League Soccer, and it's very, very exciting. But look, let's make no bones about it. Atlanta United are leading the way in terms of ushering Major League Soccer into this new realm.
This is the part of the week where Maddie realizes that she can't use technology. I feel like John Nelson. It'd be nice if I unmuted myself. It was great catching up with Callum Williams today as well. And after that question, I then followed up with how he's seen everything grow from looking at all these different markets that have been brought up from the league, LAFC, Atlanta United, seeing how those markets have helped continue to see MLS really, really grow into this global
It's been an
state
astronomical turn. I thought, honestly, Madison, I thought we'd get to this stage at some point, but I didn't think we'd get to it this quickly. And there's an abundance of reasons as to why that's happened, right? And if we go through them, we'll be here all day. But it honestly has been wonderful to see how quickly the game is growing. I still spend a little bit of time in Europe and overseas for other bits of work. And the one thing which I've now noticed is how much Major League Soccer is a part of the conversation, where, sort of alluding to what I was saying earlier on, that was never really the case when I first came to the league. And so it's just become a part of the global footballing conversation. And so obviously growing it domestically is of vital importance. And I think that has grown really quickly as well. Markets like Atlanta, again, have led the way. And there are a handful that have had similar success locally as well. And look, there's still one or two markets that need a helping hand. We all know that. But overall, I think Major League Soccer is in the best place it's ever been. I will always remember, Madison, I came to America to be the voice of Sporting Kansas City back in 2011. And I was a ripe old 21-year-old, and I left the BBC, and I got pelters. I got a lot of sort of friendly abuse from people, sort of suggesting that I was making a massive mistake and coming to America, and no one cares about football, soccer over there. And I will always remember walking around Kansas City, and I had the Sporting Kansas City T-shirt on, the polo, the club polo that they gave us. And And at that time, they had just rebranded. They were no longer the Kansas City Wizards, and there was a new stadium on the way, and it was all very exciting. But it hit me a little bit as to how much work we had to do when I was walking around Kansas City and nobody had any idea what it was. Nobody knew what Sporting Kansas City was. They didn't recognize the logo. Somebody mistook it for an indoor soccer team and a minor league hockey team. You know, it was just, I like to call those the dark days of Major League Soccer, you know. Those were interesting days. But look, I mean, that's just not the case anymore. And one of the markets, look, Kansas City led the way massively in those early days for sure. I think Minnesota have done a remarkable job. I think the LAFC franchise has done wonderful as well. There's been so many, Portland Timbers, Seattle Sounders, we could go on. There's been so many teams that have done so well in terms of marketing themselves and making themselves relevant in the market. But Atlanta United are the ones that stand out on top to come from absolutely nothing. And have the success that they have done in terms of relevancy in a market is absolutely wonderful. Like, I don't know the exact number, Madison, but I keep hearing there's going to be 65,000 plus on opening day on Saturday. And if that's the case, well, there is a prime example as to how much people love and care about Atlanta United. And I think that's only a good thing for Major League Soccer. A good Atlanta United is good for Major League Soccer because that full stadium with the designated players that are on offer, with the standard of football that's on offer, this really could be anywhere in the world. And so I'm very, very excited to see Saturday. And I think it's going to be a very exciting time.
I did it again. But anyway, back at it. Callum's right. Actually talking to Garth Lagerwey at the Latte Lath press conference, one thing that he actually mentioned to us was a couple more tickets are still needing to be sold, but we might be getting close to a sold-out crowd on Saturday for the home opener for Atlanta United. So very, very possible. Now on, I had the chance to catch up with Dax McCarty, as many Atlanta fans know him and as many MLS fans know him. And MLS legend Dax McCarty, had the chance to catch up with him a little bit. That interview is going to go live at 8:30 right after MLS Six Pack, but I had the chance to ask him about his predictions for the upcoming 2025 MLS season.
There's too much to talk about. I will try to keep it fairly brief. For me, this might be slightly biased, and I admit that. The biggest storyline for me is easily Atlanta United. The amount of money that they've spent in this transfer window. Garth Lagerwey is putting his money where his mouth is, or Arthur's money where their mouth is. And so they said they would spend, and they did. Obviously, Miguel Almiron's return is a major, major talking point for me. I'm absolutely fascinated to see how he does in the sequel, because obviously the original with him and Joseph was must-see TV. And so Atlanta United's attack, obviously adding Emmanuel Latte-Lat as the number 9, the most expensive transfer fee in MLS history. It's going to be box office stuff. And there's going to be pressure. Atlanta United always comes with pressure, but now I think that's ramped up and the expectations are high with a new coach and some very, very good players. And so I think Atlanta United is going to be a fascinating watch in the season. Inter Miami, how do they recover from a very disappointing end to their year? Obviously, the best regular season team in MLS history, setting the points record, and then, kind of floundering in the playoffs and losing to an Atlanta United team that was, quite frankly, probably overmatched in a lot of ways, but managed to get the upset. And so I think that they have a bitter taste in their mouth with how the season ended. Be fascinated to see if the new players that they brought in, some younger players that maybe are a little bit less experienced, can come in and make a big difference for them. And then how do Messi, Suarez, and Busquets hold up? They're all a little bit older. Messi had a pretty bad injury last year with Argentina, and he missed a significant amount of time. If Messi stays healthy for 25 to 30 games, I think it's realistic to imagine him winning MVP again and setting lots and lots of records in the league. That's how good I think he still is. So fascinated to watch Inter Miami. And then out west, I'm fascinated with two teams that were very bad last year, San Jose Earthquakes and Austin FC. I think both of those teams are going to make the playoffs and be much, much better than they were. Obviously, Bruce Arena coming back into MLS, I think it's a great thing for the league. I think that he will want to end his career on a high note. And so I'm fascinated to see how San Jose does. And then Austin spending $10 million on Brandon Vasquez to be your number 9. I think that's a great acquisition. But the transfer fee, again, it comes with a lot of pressure. And so I think Austin will be better. I expect them to be better. But there's a lot of pressure on Brandon Vasquez's shoulders. And then the LA Galaxy are the defending champions. They have so many question marks going into the season. I mean, I think they lost 4 or 5 starters. They lost the MLS Cup MVP. Obviously Ricky Puig, one of the best players in the league. He's not going to be back for a number of months. So there's a lot of questions surrounding the Galaxy at this moment in time. And they were the rightful champions of MLS last year. They were brilliant pretty much all season, played a really exciting, aesthetically pleasing brand of soccer. I think it's going to be a challenging year for Greg Vanney to try to make the pieces fit together and navigate through these injuries. Joseph Paintsel is out for the beginning of the season. And so I think Greg Vanney is one of the top 3 coaches in MLS. So I think he will be able to navigate that. I still think the Galaxy are going to be one of the top 5 or 6 teams in the West. But again, there's a lot of question marks surrounding that team. So those for me are the big storylines. And of course, season 30 in MLS, San Diego, 30th team coming into the league. How do they fare? I obviously, as an expansion team, know what it's like. I have San Diego last in the West. I hope they prove me wrong. It's just hard to know with expansion teams. It's just hard to know how they're going to do because this is a group of players that have never been together. So I'd love nothing more for them to prove me wrong and make the playoffs and make a big splash, but that remains to be seen.
Always fun catching up with Dax McCarty. Once again, that interview will go live here on the network at 8:30, just a couple minutes after MLS Six Pack, so make sure you have notifications set for that. We'll be right back here on MLS Six Pack, so stay with us. Welcome back to MLS Six Pack here on the SDH Network. We bring back in Jason Longshore.
Hello.
We get ready, finally down in it, season preview as we get up for Atlanta United, for MLS, everything else. I mean, more in general, I think from Atlanta United as well as for MLS, what are some of the biggest things that stick out to you when it comes to entering the 30th season?
Well, let's get to Atlanta when we get there. Do you want to start in the Eastern Conference or do you want to start in the West?
Ooh, let's switch it up. Let's do the West.
Let's start in the West. I have not written down my power rankings or any of that. I don't like ranking them too specifically, honestly, at this point. The way that I look at it right now, and I think it's important in MLS to do this, we can sit here and we can do a predicted order of the table, but that doesn't mean the team that we pick first in that table is going to go win the playoff structure and then go to MLS Cup. I think in MLS, you have to think about which teams are the best and which teams do you think have the best opportunity to win at the end. Because we could sit here and make the argument, and we were having this discussion today, we can sit here and make the argument that Miami's the best team in the league. Okay. They might not win the East in the regular season because they're going to deal with the Club World Cup in the middle of the year. Seattle's going to deal with that. Miami and Seattle are 2 of the best teams in the league, in my opinion. They might not finish first. So if we're not, I'm not doing predicted order. I'm doing ranking them in terms of their ability to win at the end of the season, win the playoffs, go to MLS Cup. That's the number 1 caveat here to put out. All right. So in the West, I think Seattle's the best team in the West. I think I'm in the minority on that. That's okay. Won't be the first time. Won't be the last. I think the LA Galaxy are going to be pretty good. I think they're going to be not as good as they were last year. Ricky Pooch had an incredibly special season. He's not going to be available until late, if he is, period. Marco Royce is an unbelievably talented player, but can he give you what Pooch gave you for that long? I don't know if he can at this stage. I think Diego Fagundes, a very good player. He's not Ricky Pooch. So, and also Christian Ramirez is not Dejan Joveljic. So I think the Galaxy will be a step back. This can change if they go out into the market, and that could happen in the summer. So, and that could still happen now, honestly. So stay tuned on that. But as we sit here on February 20th, I think Seattle is a better team than the Galaxy or LAFC. And I think those are the three in the West. They have the best chance to win the West when all is said and done. But I think Seattle, if I'm putting them in order, it's Seattle right now as they're constructed, even with the Galaxy missing people. I'm putting them second. I'm putting LAFC third. I just think that LAFC selling Mateusz Bogusz is going to end up being one of those moves that I get why they did it. It was a huge amount of money. He was such an important player for them. And I thought LAFC was better with him playing higher up the field than when Olivier Giroud played. So I know we get hung up on names and box office and all that, but I think Bogusz was more important than maybe most did. So we'll see. Steve Cherundolo has proven plenty of people wrong. He's proven me wrong before. He can do this, but they're going to be less of LAFC than they've been in the past. I think they're going to be more defensive. I think they're going to be more negative in a lot of ways, and I think losing Mateusz Bogusz is going to hurt them a lot. So Seattle, Galaxy, LAFC, that's my top three in the West.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I keep going back and forth with switching Seattle and LA. Like earlier today when we had talked, I was like, yeah, Seattle makes sense. But then I keep going back on it. Like even later today, I was like, I don't know. I was like, LA Galaxy, yes, I know that they're missing so many key players. Obviously, they're missing Paintsel for the first few matches of the season. That's huge. That's another huge loss for them. Ricky Pooch, obviously. I mean, I've said it last season. I'm saying it again. He was one of my favorite players to watch last season with the LA Galaxy. I mean, every time. He there's something about him. He has that flair. He's so brilliant. And him not being on the pitch for the Galaxy, that's gonna suck. That's a huge loss for them. But I don't know. I keep going back and forth with those two. I would agree at LAFC being third, though. I think they'll still be okay, but I don't think they're gonna be spectacular like we've seen them years past. I think they might fall a little bit. Honestly, I could see him falling to fourth too. I could see him going down the leaderboard as the season goes on.
Maybe. We'll take Parzival's audible here. He says I like picking who you think we'll see in each conference semifinal. So the top four. Seattle, the two LA teams are mine. I'm gonna really go out on a limb and say Houston as the fourth one. I don't know why I feel like I'm going out on a limb, but just looking at other predictions, I think a lot of people have had Houston lower down the table. I think they're going to be better. Jack McGlynn, I think, is ready to break out in this league, and I think Ben Olsen is going to get the most out of him. I got Houston as number 4. I'll put them at 4. So my early Western Conference semifinal predictions would be Seattle and Houston and El Tráfico in the other one.
Okay. Mine, I'm going to do LA Galaxy number 1, Seattle 2, LAFC 3, and Houston is another good one, but I don't know why I'm leaning more towards Colorado.
I like Colorado too.
I think Colorado can jump it. I think what they can do. I mean, they impressed me a little bit last season too. Like, they crept in. I mean, they have a solid team, and I wouldn't be shocked if they're up there in number 4. So that's mine. I think I'll go LA Galaxy, Seattle, LAFC. I'll do Colorado. I think Houston is slowly really close in at the 5.
Yeah, I could see Colorado anywhere between 4th and 8th or so. I really like Chris Armas as a coach. I don't think he gets enough credit. Georgi Mihailovic, I think, is one of the most talented players in the league. And I really like that MLS can be a spot where, you're going to go sign huge, big names in some markets and some teams, but then also it's a place where Jack McGlynn can become a star, Georgi Mihailovic can become a star, young American talents. I really like that you get all of that in this league. So yeah, Colorado, I'm with it. I think they'll be behind Houston, but I can see that.
Yeah.
All right, so we got to go to the East.
Yep.
Miami and Atlanta, I think, are the two best teams in the East.
I would agree. Absolutely.
I don't think it's like unthinkable that they don't finish 1-2, but I think they're the two best teams. So in the way that we're talking about this, getting to the conference semifinal, Miami could finish as low as 4th, in my opinion. You never know how the injuries are going to happen. Dax talked about it with Messi getting hurt and missing time last year. They were actually pretty good without him, which shocked me. I did not see that coming. I don't know if they'll do that again this time. They're going to have to manage the minutes of those guys. You get into Club World Cup, Miami is in a group that could absolutely get out of it and go to the knockout rounds. You're going to put everything into that tournament. You should, no question. And if that means you lose some games on the other side of the break, or you have to rest guys, whatever, you deal with it. You have plenty of time from mid-July when that tournament ends to being ready for the postseason to start in mid-October. So you can rest guys along the way. They'll be good enough to be top 4, I would think. But Miami and Atlanta, I think, are the two best teams in the East. I think the New York Red Bulls are like a half step back. I think we saw last year when they had Emil Forsberg, they were as good as anybody in the league. And when they didn't, they were not very good. They've got to be somewhere in between because, Forsberg should be healthier, you would think, this year, but you've got to have some other guys who could step up a little bit. They got to show that. But for me, they're third. I think Sandro Schwartz will be even better as a manager for them. The 4th spot in the East is really tricky for me on one front. Cincinnati should be that. On paper, you go out and you sign Kevin Dinky, you go out and you sign Evander. That's $28+ million that you're spending on those two guys. We talk about it here in Atlanta that you went out and you spent on Miguel Almiron and Latelat. You're talking $34 million or so. You spend that kind of money, you should be really good. You should get production out of those two guys. I have questions about both. They both scored in CONCACAF. They're both very talented players. Denke, I think one of the big headlines about him has been, Golden Boot in Belgium. Hugo Kuipers with Chicago was that. And Hugo Kuipers is a good forward in this league. Not a $16 million forward. We'll see if Denke can be that for Cincinnati. And we'll see if Evander, who the way it did it in Portland is not good. And I think to a lesser extent, Dallas has to have the same question about Lucho. Like, you're getting somebody who made it very difficult for them to stay in their previous club. Does that rear its head again? If Evander isn't happy in mid-season, does he perform at the level that we've seen him perform in this league? I think there's question marks. I also think Lucho's a better player. So I don't know if Cincinnati is better with Evander than with Lucho. They couldn't keep Lucho. That ship had sailed. But Cincinnati should be 4th. I'm not comfortable with picking them 4th. I'm just not. I'm not comfortable with Columbus being picked 4th because I don't know who's going to score the goals right now with Cucho gone, with Ramirez gone. I don't know where the goals come from for them. You start to look at who else could be that, and you start to glance down at Orlando and Charlotte. Orlando, Pasalic replacing Facundo Torres. That's a big ask for Pasalic. Facundo Torres was so good for Orlando, and I think he's one of the poster children in this league for don't make snap decisions on if a guy is good or not. There were a lot of people saying that Facundo Torres was overrated and he wasn't that good after like a month of games. Yeah, he was amazing. So Pasalic needs some time. I don't know if he's going to be Facundo Torres for that team. Atuesta can help replace Cartagena. Duncan McGuire is going to miss time at the beginning of the season with the shoulder injury that he suffered in the postseason. Luis Moriel has to be better. So that there's a lot of about Orlando. I think there's a decent bit of about Charlotte. adding Wilfred Zaha is a good move. He's very talented. It could work really well. He also, I want to see how he handles being the man, because he's going to have to be the man for that team. Patrick Agyemang can also be the man for that team, and I have more faith in him. Pep Biel, they got him back on a good deal. I give him that. I like him as a player. You're going to need a lot out of Wilfred Zaha, in my opinion, on that team. I also have questions about what they're going to do at left back. They haven't added anybody. Tim Ream as a left back in this league over the entire season is not going to work. It's just not. I also think Charlotte's got to be more expansive. I feel like they were too defensive last year. So I don't feel 100% comfortable about them as fourth. So I'm going to go with Cincinnati as fourth. I don't like it. I don't trust it. I would not be putting our joke back in the day on SDH was we talk about juice boxes, and with a pick like this that I don't like, you're putting a juice box on it that you don't like. So like, for me, it's one of those weird multi-flavored fruit juice boxes that I'm putting on that. Like, it's probably got cranberry and like kiwi and something else trying to be cool, and it's just stuff that doesn't necessarily go together. That's the juice box I'm putting on this, because I don't feel comfortable with it at all. So my semifinals, if I put them in the order that I think they would finish, I don't think Miami wins the East in the regular season. I think Atlanta should. They have to do it. They have to perform. I think they should, because I think Miami's going to have some doldrums where they're just old and tired. I think they'll be second. So I think it will be Atlanta and Cincinnati in one conference semifinal, and the other one will be Miami and the Red Bulls, which would be a really interesting game.
That would be really interesting. I agree with you. You literally, it's like you read my mind with that one. I
feel like it's kind of cut and dried though in the East. Like,
no, I agree. Like I think if you're looking at what Inter Miami has to do, not just with the regular season, and you're looking at CONCACAF, you're looking at Club World Cup, you're also looking at Leagues Cup, they're going to have a lot more competitions to go through. They're going to have a lot of tired legs, and it might get to a point where they might, throw a little bit of like, we got a regular season game, but we got Club World Cup going on. I think you're going to have lulls. So that's why I do think, especially if Atlanta performs, I think they'll be number one, and I think Inter Miami will be number two. And then I think I have the same issues with Columbus. I want to, but who's going to be there up top for them? Like, no, there's no one there. You don't have Cucho Hernandez anymore.
Until they go out and make signings, I can't put Columbus anywhere in the top six.
No, you can't, because you don't know.
As they're currently constructed, Charlotte, Orlando, Cincinnati, Red Bull, Miami, Atlanta are all better than Columbus. And I think Wilfred Nancy is the best coach in the league, but he doesn't have enough to work with right now.
Yeah, I think Red Bulls is up there. I'm gonna go on a limb, and I'm gonna say that it's gonna be Red Bulls in Orlando. I think Cincinnati might get bumped down a little bit, especially with that. My one hesitation is because of Forsberg and his track record. If he can stay healthy, then yes. Will he? I don't know. That's why I think it might be a little bit more of like Red Bulls, maybe Orlando can jump it. Because I do think Orlando is still a pretty solid team, even though they have some question marks in filling in certain positions. I do think that if you're looking at them and I'm looking at Red Bulls, you're still looking at those question marks. But if Forsberg can stay healthy and he's ready to go, yeah, Red Bulls is going to be good.
Before we get into match week 1, I want to get into Parzival's question here, because I did say that Atlanta would be the best team in the East. D. Graham says no. I totally get it. I think the defense, as I've said many times over the last couple of weeks, I think the defense is going to define this season.
No, for sure.
But Parzival said, does Atlanta host MLS Cup? And yeah, I think they have every opportunity to do it, because I think the West is a little more competitive in some ways. And it kind of flipped. Last year, I felt like the East beat itself up, and the West was maybe a little overinflated in terms of some of the point totals. In this year, I feel like it might be the reverse. I think there's some more clear-cut lines in the East. Like, we talked about the top 7. If you go Orlando and you go Charlotte and you go Columbus, after that, I I have no idea. Like Montreal, I really do think Montreal is a good team. I don't think they have a ton of talent. I think Laurent Courtois is a very, very good young manager, and I think they will have some really big wins and they'll have some really big losses because of the talent structure there. I think Chicago will be better. I think Greg Berhalter will make them better, but I don't think they have enough to really compete with that front 7. I don't think DC is all that great. I don't think Nashville is all that great. BJ Callahan can't work miracles. New England has so many new faces. I don't know what to expect. They should be better. They're not showing that in preseason. I think they showed it before they played Atlanta, and it was interesting hearing Caleb Porter's comments after that game. Like it felt very deferential in a way, and that it should tell you something on both sides of it. That should be a little bit of a warning signal for New England in that he doesn't really know what he's got yet. And it should also tell you that people are looking at Atlanta and saying, "Whoa, wait a minute! That was before Latte Lot was playing there." NYC with Santiago Rodriguez on the way out. Like, I don't know what they look like under a new manager. I want to see what Pascal Jensen does with that group. Philadelphia, Bradley Carnell. It's going to be somewhat similar to what we saw before, but is it going to look different? Is he as good of a coach as Jim Curtin? I don't know that. Yeah. And I don't think Toronto's very good. And I think Toronto's going to have some serious issues. Lorenzo Insigne turned down a lot of offers to leave. Is it going to actually be beneficial that he stayed? I'm not so sure that it is. So I think there is like top 7 in the East and the bottom 8. It's a big gap.
Yeah. And even going back to D Graham, as well, he commented too, thinking he doesn't think Atlanta will win the East. Obviously do the defense as well as whatever year we get with Brad Guzan as well. I mean, but I would arguably say, if you look at last year, Inter Miami was number 1 of the East, and we had the same questions about them.
Yeah, I mean,
especially with their defense. And I mean, you look at what we have now up top. We got Latte Lath, you got Miguel Almiron, you have Sabalov Janice, and then you have Alexei Maranchuk right there. You also have a starred lineup as well with Inter Miami, with Messi, with Suarez, with Busquets, with Alba. And we had the same questions. Will the defense be able to stack up? But at the end of the day, it didn't matter because they were able to come in and win games when they needed to. And, they weren't clean sheets, but they were wins. And at the end of the day, wins get you in.
Regular season, yeah, I think you can roll with incredible offense and win often. I think when you get to postseason's
gonna be right.
Gotta have something defensively. And look, it's an absolute valid question. And I like I said, I think the line that I've used a lot is Atlanta United's season will be defined by how well they defend. Now, I don't think the way that they defend is purely down to the back 4, though. So keep that in mind. I think this team will defend high up the field. And the more that they do that, the more cover you give to your back 4 and to your goalkeeper. And you're in a better spot. So you're going to have to get those big defensive performances from Almiron, from Saba, from Latte Lat, who all like to press. You're going to have to get Maranchuk involved defensively. And as Ronnie Dyla talked to us today, the holding midfield duo, the 2 6s, that's going to be very important in providing that balance. So we'll see. I think on paper, Atlanta United can win the East. Will they? I don't have a crystal ball. I cannot tell you. The Magic 8 ball is cloudy. But they have every opportunity to, and they need to take it. And before we get into the schedule for week 1 and give you some thoughts on each match, Parzival asked, at the summer break, what metrics have to be met by Atlanta to be back? I don't know if there's a metric. I don't know if it's really a number, honestly. I think it's more of a feel. That's how I define it. Everybody will define it differently. Like some will put a point total on it. I get it. Some will put a goal tally on it for Latte Lat or for Almiron. I get it.
I would agree. I feel like obviously it's summer break. I mean, It's hard. It's hard because, we say at summer break, but I mean, the season is still so long and you got so much time to figure things out. I mean, I agree. I think it's a feel thing. For me at least. I don't think you can gauge it based off wins, losses, draws, points. I don't think you can do that because how many times have we seen in this league where it doesn't matter how many, well, it does matter how many wins and losses and points you have, but to a certain extent, you look at it at summer break and you look and you say, oh, well, this team is, as close to the bottom of the table. And then how many times have we seen them jump up closer to 9, 8, 7, 6 in the table? It really just depends.
Before the summer window opens is where I'll put it, because things can change when that summer transfer window opens.
Yep, absolutely.
And teams can make big jumps and get the right guys, and it can blend like it did here in 2023.
Yep.
But I think that from a very basic standpoint, they need to be mostly perfect at home. That was the biggest issue last season, is they dropped points at home way too often. They lost games at home way too often. That needs to change. And I think they're going to need to go out and have a couple of important wins against top teams on the road. If I'm looking at defining their back in the summer, that would be the things I'm looking for. They need to not have multiple losses at home, and they need to have a couple of games on the road that you look at and you're like, oh, wait a minute, that was a really good win. And just pulling it up. I mean, just to kind of take you up to that first portion of it real quick. Charlotte is a big game on Saturday, March 1st. That's a team that can really be pushing you in where you are. Cincinnati, that's another one. Philadelphia, that should feel like one you can go out and get a win. Orlando on the road. Those are all signature kind of games on the road. Austin on the road might be a signature game. Austin's a team we didn't really talk about in the West. I want to see what they look like. Chicago, I'm curious. You know what honestly might be the game where we make this decision on if they're back or if they're not back or whatever? Might be at Red Bulls on May 31st. That's a massive game. This team has never gotten a win there. And if they do, we might be having a different conversation about it. But everybody will define it different ways, and nobody's right or wrong. It's just, this is where we are right now. I mean, you look at predictions around the league and they're all over the place. It just is. So we're going to try to keep this show when we go. This will be a Thursday night show throughout the season here on the SDH Network. We're going to try to keep this to about an hour. We're well past that. We're about as brief as Dax McCarty said he was brief with the 4.5 minute soliloquy on MLS in 2025, which was great, not brief. Let's run through the schedule really quick in week 1. LAFC and Minnesota. I talked about it with LAFC. Minnesota is another one of those teams that I don't know. I just don't know how to feel about them yet.
I feel like that's with both of them, with both LAFC and
in different levels. Yes. Yes.
We don't know. Cue the shrug of like I think
LAFC is a better team than Minnesota.
Yeah.
But I don't know where either one of them necessarily fall. LAFC at home, they're dealing with CONCACAF, and that's the other thing to think about when you think about this week's games. Keep that in mind. Don't overreact to LAFC if they lose to Minnesota, if they rest guys to get ready for the second leg to try to knock Colorado out. That's going to be a factor in these games. And I feel like we say this all the time, and we're not going to get into juice boxes here. We're not going to get into odds. If you are actually listening to us to bet on MLS, you are a sicko and you probably need help, and you should call the hotline. Don't do it, because this league is difficult enough to predict week to week to week. It's so hard because of all the chaos in it. Minnesota to LA is a long trip. It's week 1. LAFC might rest 5 guys to get them ready. They might have guys with hypothermia after playing in 5 degrees in Colorado. You got to deal with a whole bunch of stuff. So I think LAFC is a better team. They're at home. They should probably win. Maybe we'll learn a little something about those two teams that I think we need to learn a little something about.
Absolutely. And then I'll save Atlanta Montreal for the end.
Save it for the back end. Yep.
I'll save it for the end. Let's get to Cincinnati versus New York Red Bulls, which could be a fun one.
That's going to be a big game. two teams that are kind of built in similar ways, two teams that want to do some similar things. Cincinnati tripped on Durison back. They're not going to have to worry about the second leg against Motagua, so that helps them. They don't have to rotate guys here to deal with the second leg, but you're going to have guys who could be tired. So we'll see. And Evander hasn't been there very long. So I feel like that could be a game. And again, this goes back to my wishy-washiness about Cincinnati. I feel like that could be a game where you see the road team go in and get a win. I think the Red Bulls can go get a win there in Cincinnati.
I agree with you. I agree with you completely. And MLS 360 is going to come in clutch on Saturday, because that's going to be a game that I'm going to be circling and, obviously watching Atlanta United as well. Because,
yes,
we do.
You'll be a little busy.
Just a little bit. Let's go ahead and move on to Columbus versus Chicago.
Yeah, look, it's the Berhalter Bowl, right? I mean, he was at Columbus before. He's in Chicago now. I think he'll make Chicago better. I think where Columbus is at the moment, Chicago could go in and get a result. I would probably look at a draw in that one. Chicago has a lot of nice pieces. Brian Gutierrez is a player that I feel like I talk about a lot, and I'm waiting for him to take the next leap. I think McGlynn and I think Cuti Pietro, who went from DC to Colorado. I think there's guys who are, ahead of Gutierrez. I think maybe Berhalter is the guy to really make him not just a very good young American player, but one of the guys in this league. And that's one that I'll be watching to see how he impacts Brian Gutierrez.
So many fun matchups in the first,
some interesting ones. Yeah.
Interesting ones. I just even looking through them now, I'm like, ooh, there's a ton that are really good. Great way to start the 30th season.
The next one's not.
Yeah, next one. I say that. I literally say this as we talked about these games, and then I get to this one. It's a DC versus Toronto.
Hide your eyes. Make sure nothing falls on you at Audi Field. They are talking about expanding Audi Field, which is interesting. I hope they build a better broadcast booth, but that's a whole nother topic for another day. DC should be okay here at home. Christian Benteke gives you an opportunity in every game. It's not always pretty. Troy Lesane, I think, is in a really interesting spot in DC in that I don't think he's being given enough to work with. And I think it might end up costing him his job because he's in the second year. I don't think they're going to be all that good. They need to get off to a good start. They should against Toronto. But you got guys in Benteke and Insigne and Bernardeschi on the Toronto side too. I don't know who else Toronto has at this point to help Insigne and Bernardeschi, but those are two guys who can win games almost on their own. Benteke can ruin your day. I just think it's going to be an ugly game. I want to see what Robin Fraser wants to do with Toronto. That's another one of the questions I have coming into the season. Robin is a manager who is very highly regarded by a lot of people. I feel like he's been in a lot of kind of bad situations. He's in another one. I want to see what his imprint is on that Toronto team, because I think if he can find a way to find something that works to get the best out of those guys, maybe they can paper over a few of the cracks. But I think they're kind of in the situation that we've talked about with a few other teams. They just don't have enough talent. And talent is the most important thing here. You have to have enough of it. I don't think they have enough of it in enough spots. They have two very talented players who at times can be malcontents.
And I'll bring it up because this is something that was brought up to me today when I was having those interviews. I do not remember if it was Callum Williams or Dax McCarty. It could have been both of them because they're both geniuses when it comes to this. Mateusz Klich, 13 assists, 12, 13, I'm going to say 13 assists with DC United last season. They are losing a huge playmaker in that midfield from him, and he's coming to Atlanta. I think that's another big thing to look at from DC in that perspective. You lose a DP slot. You're basically paying for a DP slot that you don't have because we obviously have it here in Atlanta now. So
they're rebuilding, and it's obvious, and it's gonna ultimately cost Troy Lesane his job, and I don't think it's fair. That's the nature of being a coach in this league. It's very difficult at times. They'll get through Toronto, but I don't think they'll get through a lot else.
All right, we'll get through this rapidly. Miami versus NYCFC.
I want to see how much rotation Miami has. They got a 1-0 win over Kansas City, so the second leg they're going to have to work. I would not be surprised to see a lot of those aging veterans rotated out for this game. That opens the door for NYC for sure.
Orlando City versus Philadelphia Union.
I mentioned it before with Pasalic and replacing Facundo Torres. I think he could be close, but he's not going to be straight away. Philadelphia, I'm fascinated to see what they look like under Bradley Carnell versus what they looked like under Jim Curtin. I felt like Curtin got more and more negative and more cynical during his time in Philadelphia. He wasn't that way earlier. My question is the influence of Ernst Tanner on what, and it sounds like Tanner and Curtin had issues. How much did Tanner influence the way that the team played on the field? Or was that just a natural evolution? Bradley Carnell had a really good year in St. Louis and then a not so good year in St. Louis. Who is Bradley Carnell as a manager? And does he get pushed into playing a certain way by Ernst Tanner? Or does he find something that's maybe a little bit different with this group for Philadelphia? I think Orlando will have enough to take care of things on opening day, but Philly's one of the teams I'll be watching early on to see what the effect of a new manager will be for them.
All right, let's get to a team that I'm actually really intrigued to see how they fare up this season in the West. Austin versus Kansas City.
I think it's a sneaky good game. It would be better if Kansas City wasn't in CONCACAF because Jovic is going to make them better. Finally gives them a number 9 if he can stay healthy that they have needed. Honestly, since they traded Dom Dwyer back in 2017, they've had Alan Pulido when he was healthy was great, but he was hardly ever healthy. Austin is another one like Cincinnati who went out and they spent a lot of money. Brandon Vasquez is a proven quantity in this league. Their other big spends are not as proven of quantities. So do guys hit the ground running? Do they need time? Austin's a team that I don't have a good sense of what they will be. Now, Nico Estevez is another manager that hire was really interesting because he didn't have a great run of it in Dallas, and he goes across the state. So I want to see how Austin looks. Identity-wise, it feels like everything's lining up to be high possession, a lot of the ball, decent bit of counter pressure. Pieces seem to fit it. Estevez probably believes in that along with Rodolfo Borrell. Are they all the way there now, or are they an evolution as the year goes on? I think the latter, and I think they'll take advantage of Kansas City, who absolutely should put everything towards midweek in Fort Lauderdale against Miami.
Houston versus Dallas.
Big game. Always a big game. But this is one that I'm high on both of these teams. I liked seeing Dallas up close on Saturday in Marietta. Really good pressure, really well organized under Eric Quill. Somewhat similar to the way that Atlanta wants to play as well. A lot of counter pressure, a little bit different structure for Dallas. I have different questions about them defensively than I do with Atlanta. I think Dallas has more pace, but maybe less seasoning, whereas it's like the other way around with Atlanta. I think you have a lot of really good veterans, but if Gregerson is not available or not 100%, do you have enough pace on that back line to deal with the ball over the top playing a high line? I think Houston gets it done at home. I want to see Jack McGlynn in a Houston shirt. I do think Dallas could be a team that right now I don't have in that top 4 in the West, but could maybe find their way there if Eric Quill develops them like I think he's capable of.
Got another game that's a little bit like DC Toronto. We got Nashville versus New England.
See, if I had a sound effect and we had the rights to it, I'd play the Debbie Downer music there. Nashville, I'm not super high on. We didn't get enough of a glimpse at what BJ Callahan's going to do with this team. I don't know. I don't know who he is as a manager. I don't know what he stands for. And I as a manager, I want to know that. Like, I feel like a lot of the managers that we're talking about that are new in these teams, we have a pretty good sense of who they are, or we have at least enough of a track record to figure that out. We don't have that with BJ Callahan. So I don't know what Nashville wants to be yet. I think I do know what New England wants to be, but I don't know if they're going to be that anytime soon. so many new faces for New England. Some good additions on paper, but I was not impressed in their preseason game against Atlanta. So Nashville at home, New England, meh. Feels like a very fun scoreless draw. Have fun. Broadway will be hopping after the game. That's about all I can say.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. St. Louis versus Colorado.
Colorado's got to manage CONCACAF, or I would really back them to go to St. Louis and get a result. I would. I think Colorado is a better team. St. Louis is another one that there's a lot of unknown. Olaf Melberg, are they going to be even more? And I don't know exactly how you're even more what they were. Lutz Fanon still has a very clear way that he wants his team to look. He goes out and he signs players that other teams might not want because they really fit the way that St. Louis wants to play. I feel like he would be a very hands-on kind of person in dictating that. The question about Philadelphia, I don't know if Tanner is as much of that. I feel like Fanon still absolutely is. So, okay, are they even less of the ball than what Carnell wanted, which wasn't much? Are they even more direct or pressing, or do they press differently? Like, I don't know yet. Colorado's a better team and should win this. I don't think they do because they have to put everything in getting past LAFC in the midweek and CONCACAF. I think that's going to hurt them here, and they probably drop the 3 points. St. Louis gets it.
St. Louis versus Real Salt Lake.
San Jose.
San Jose. Oh, my goodness.
St. Louis isn't playing twice. We don't want that.
It's my brain.
It happens. It happens. San Jose is a really interesting team this year because Bruce Arena, Chicho Arango, Joseph Martinez, all in the same locker room. I asked Jillian Sakovitz about it on Atlanta Soccer Tonight this week, and she had a really good point. You know, like anybody who's played for Bruce, he doesn't put up with crap. You know, he just doesn't. He's probably older and grouchier now. So, like, Joseph, if he flips over a table, I don't know if Bruce is going to flip the table back at him. He might. Chicho, like, Chicho's had some issues in places. He got suspended in Salt Lake. So how, like, when all that came together, I requested / demanded for a Hard Knocks documentary to follow that team all season long. Like, I want cameras in the locker room. I want cameras following them on the training pitch. I feel like there's going to be some wild stories in San Jose this year, but they also might be really good on the field. Like, that's the thing, is they could be a really interesting team. Bruce has been a very good manager, even in his last stop at New England. Remember how good they were before whatever happened that nobody will talk about happened, and they put him in timeout on the side. So I think San Jose will be pretty good. RSL's the one with losing Arango, with making the sales that they did in midseason last year. They were in the top 4 last year, but they really fell off in the second half. I think Houston will pass them. I think Colorado will pass them. San Jose might pass them this season. RSL might be the one that makes the biggest fall, depending on what else they do in the transfer market. They need help, and I don't think they've gotten it yet. San Jose wins at home. The Bruce Arena era gets started with a win.
I mean, maybe for the second season of Onside by MLS,
just
we got to
only San Jose.
San Jose. Just get everything in.
I would be all in. Like, I would be must watch. Cranky Bruce having to deal with Joseph and Chicho. Like, yes, I want to see this.
All right, we got a crossover. We got West versus the East. We got Seattle versus Charlotte.
Seattle should be okay here. They don't have to sweat the second leg too much in CONCACAF. They have to deal with the travel. This is a statement kind of game for Charlotte. Like, if Charlotte is as good as I think they are, if they're as good as some of the people nationally think they are, this is the one for me that Charlotte has the biggest opportunity to make a statement in week 1. If they go out there and get a result, all right, we all got to look at Charlotte a little bit differently. I think a lot of people already are. If they go out there and get spanked, I think people who are looking at them positively are going to have to look at them a little differently. I think they lose. I think Seattle takes care of it. But Charlotte has every opportunity to change people's minds here, either way, positively or negatively.
All righty. Now we get to the Sunday games. Number 1 at 4 p.m., we have Portland versus Vancouver.
Portland and Vancouver. Diego Chara back with Portland. It would be his 400th game if he plays. He probably would. Vancouver is one. We'll see how they do tonight, and they're in Costa Rica against Saprissa. I don't think they're deep enough to be able to handle that. Whatever they get the result, whatever happens tonight, dealing with the second leg potentially. I don't think they take care of business enough to not have to worry about a second leg. Not at Saprissa. So I think they're going to struggle in this. I think Diego Chara gets his 400th game, and I think Portland gets the win. And I'm really curious to see how Portland looks without Evander, with DaCosta coming in, and second year of Phil Neville. I feel like he's a little bit of a punching bag for a lot of people. Portland might be a quietly good team in the West.
We finally get to Sunday Night Soccer, 7 p.m., LA Galaxy versus the new expansion team in San Diego.
I'm with Dax. I don't really have high hopes for San Diego. I'm surprised. I thought they would have a better roster at this stage. They'll be one that will develop talent over time. So give them some time. But I expected more. I think Chucky Lozano can't do everything. De La Torre can't do everything. I don't really know what San Diego is going to be. I do want to see their first home game. That's going to be fun. This is not that. Galaxy will get to have a lot of fun in this one. I think Galaxy take care of business pretty comfortably. And Christian Ramirez is a really interesting one this season. He's a little bit older. He's never really been allowed to be the man in MLS. He was the man in Minnesota before they came to MLS. For whatever reason, they didn't let him be the guy. He moved around, was always the second guy or just an okay guy. Went to Aberdeen and was really good for the first portion of his time there under Stephen Glass. Glassy got let go, and the second guy who came in, Godwin, didn't even really seem to care about Ramirez at all. And in Columbus, he was the second guy. He's going to have to be the number one guy right now for the Galaxy, and he's at home. He's back, where he's from. So I don't know if he can do it for the whole season, but I think early in the season, Christian Ramirez could be one of those guys that in the Golden Boot race, we're like, whoa, wait a minute, didn't see that one coming. I think he's got that potential, and I think he's going to get a good start against San Diego. If you want a crazy prop bet for week one, Christian Ramirez to score more than one goal would be my crazy prop bet of the week.
If this happens, I will
just
be
remember,
upset.
You can clip it.
We'll clip it. Don't worry. We'll play it. We'll have John play it on the morning show on Monday if it happens.
Yeah, if it happens, you can use that for sure.
All right, definitely way past what we're supposed to. But hey, it's the first week of MLS. We got
a lot of extra time.
We got to get into it. But last game, Atlanta United versus CF Montreal.
It's gonna be a fun one. I think it's gonna be a really entertaining game for the neutral fans. I think I will probably be very anxious for a large portion of it. I'm very high on Montreal. And again, I know I might be in the minority on here. Laurent Courtois, I think, is just a really good manager. They play in a really different way. Atlanta hasn't played anybody who plays like Montreal. I think you're going to have some really nervy moments with Montreal's pressure. Caden Clark and Bryce Duke, the way they do the kind of dual 10s in their 3-4-3. They're in 3-4-3. Sometimes you see those wide forwards wide, not here. They're tucked in. They're underneath. It's almost like a box midfield. I think Montreal can give up goals, but I think they could score goals. I think they're going to be very risk taking here. That could lead to some chaos. I think maybe the first 30 minutes will not be comfortable, but Atlanta will find themselves as the game goes. The questions on the Atlanta side are just, if Gregerson starts, how long can he go? He's played 45 minutes twice in the last week of preseason. Can he go deeper than that? I think you heard from Ronnie Dyla today, like Derek Williams, they're going to do a fitness test. That doesn't sound good for him being able to play 90. I don't know if he's good enough to start. We'll have to wait and see. No Pedro Amador, no Brooks Lennon. So you're going to have fullbacks there that haven't been your first choice guys coming into the season. So yeah, there's going to be questions, and I think there's going to be mistakes. But I think there's going to be a lot of excitement because it will be a very open game. I think it'll be a wide open game. I think it'll be a very direct game. If you want another crazy prop bet, I think the over under, I don't know what the number would be, but I think there's at least 4 goals in this game between the two teams because it's just going to be open. I think there's going to be a lot of transition moments, a lot of direct play that's going to lead to goals. I think Atlanta takes care of business. I think they're a better team. I think they can exploit some lack of pace in Montreal, especially in the back, especially in the midfield. But you're going to have to be solid enough to deal with the moments where Montreal puts you under pressure. How do you handle it? And when those moments happen where Caden Clark drifts into like pockets wide and gets you into that question of, does the center back go? Does the fullback go? Or does the central midfielder go? Making those proper decisions will be really, really important for Atlanta. And we'll see if they do. I don't think they will every time, and they'll probably lead to giving up a goal or two, but I think they'll do it enough to get the win.
You'll have a lot of fans feeding off the energy. One thing that's really cool that we have in our notes here, Miguel Almiron would become the 4th player in Atlanta United history to reach 50 career goal contributions, joining Joseph Martinez at 114, Thiago Almada at 56, and Julian Gressel at 50. So something to keep on the lookout for, and especially if we're having the over-under of 4 goals in this game, more than likely Miguel might be a part of that one. So, and not even to mention the energy in the Benz is going to be absolutely unreal. I think even from the second fans walk in to the minute they announce Miguel Almiron,
that's the one that I'm waiting on.
That's going to be, listen, Dax has already asked for someone to film it and send it to him. So I've already been tasked with that mission.
There you go.
So definitely going to be one, especially as a founding member, me and my family. That's something too that my dad is also like, you gotta film it.
It's going to be a special moment for sure. It's one of those moments that you don't always get, and it's something I said a lot last year during the stretch run, where it was just a very special time to be around that team and to follow that team. You can't ever guarantee those moments, even when you go out and you spend $34 million in the offseason to go get to very talented players. There's no guarantees that it works. There's no guarantees that everything falls into place. There's no guarantees you don't have injuries, none of that. What we can probably guarantee here is that Miguel Almiron will be in the starting lineup, and it will be a very special moment when he is announced. So that is something to embrace and to cherish. And yes, record it and save it.
Save all the memories for Saturday, because it's going to be a memorable one. It's going to be a fun one. Hopefully a full house as well at the Bend. So maybe the roof might not be open, but we might blow it off.
It's going to be too cold. Don't open the roof.
We might blow it off with how loud it's going to be in there, but it's going to be a ton of fun. We're already well past where we're supposed to be at MLS Six Pack, but hey, 30th season of MLS, let's get it rolling. So thank you guys so much again for listening to MLS Six Pack here on the SDH Network. We will be back here next Thursday for another episode of MLS Six Pack. Myself, Jason Longshore, and we'll occasionally have Jessica Charman come in and join us as well as a special guest. She will fly in when she's not busy calling all of the games that she is doing, because she is busy as all get out. And
in Colombia, that too.
Absolutely. All the above. But make sure you guys stick in for next week. We're going to have a lot more content in the weeks coming up, especially leading into the home opener. Dax McCarty interview is coming out in 8 minutes live on the network, so make sure you guys tune into that as well. But thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we'll see you guys next time.